Right now, if you got sick, you'd know exactly what to do. Take a pill. Call a doctor. Look up your symptoms in seconds. But for more than 99% of human history, none of that existed. No pills, no doctors, no hospitals. And not one single person on Earth knew that disease is caused by tiny, invisible organisms. Because that idea wouldn't exist until the 1860s. For almost the entire story of our species, getting sick meant facing an invisible enemy completely blind. So what did ancient humans actually do when their bodies started to fail them? The answer is more clever, more brutal, and more surprising than you'd ever guess. And by the end, it will change the way you think about your own body the next time you're ill. Start with how terrifying sickness was. To an ancient human, illness came out of nowhere. One morning you were strong. By nightfall you were shaking, burning, fading. You couldn't see a virus. You couldn't see bacteria. There was no visible cause at all. So people reached for the only explanation that fit. Something invisible was attacking them. And if it was invisible, it had to be supernatural. For thousands of years, across almost every culture on Earth, illness wasn't a medical problem. It was a verdict, an angry god, a curse from an enemy, an evil spirit that had slipped inside the body. When you got sick, nobody asked what you had caught. They asked what you had done to deserve it. That single belief created the world's first healers. Long before there were doctors, there were shamans. Men and women who claimed they could reach into the spirit world. When you fell ill, they didn't take your pulse. They performed. They chanted. They danced. They shook rattles. They burned herbs and tried to drive the evil force out of your body. Sometimes they would press their lips to your skin and suck out a small stone or splinter of bone, secretly hidden in their mouth, and hold it up as proof your sickness was gone. It sounds like obvious fakery, and a lot of it was. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It worked far more often than it should have. Partly because the body heals most minor illness on its own, but also because of something modern science has measured again and again: the simple, staggering power of believing you are being cured. We call it the placebo effect, and it is so strong that doctors today must test every new drug against a fake one, just to prove the real medicine is doing anything at all. Ancient healers had stumbled onto something real, and it wasn't the only real medicine they found, because over thousands of years, and countless deaths, ancient humans slowly mapped out a pharmacy hidden in the natural world. They discovered that chewing the bark of a willow tree could dull pain and break a fever. They had no idea why. But willow contains salicylic acid, the exact compound we would one day purify and sell as aspirin. Over 2,000 years ago, the Greek physician Hippocrates was already prescribing willow for pain and fever. They learned that honey, smeared into a wound, somehow stopped it from rotting. And they were right, because honey is naturally antibacterial. The ancient Egyptians were packing wounds with it thousands of years ago. They even pressed moldy bread onto infected cuts, more than 3,000 years before Alexander Fleming looked at a patch of mold and discovered penicillin. None of these people could explain a single thing they were doing, but they watched, they remembered, and they passed it down. And just how far back does this knowledge really go? Further than almost anyone believed, and the proof comes from a body that isn't even human. In 2017, a team led by researcher Laura Weyrick at the University of Adelaide published a study in the journal Nature that stunned anthropologists. They had analyzed the hardened dental plaque of Neanderthals who lived around 48,000 years ago in a cave called El Cidrón in Spain. Locked inside the plaque of one individual, they found the story of a very sick creature. He had a painful abscess rotting in his jaw, and his gut carried a microbe that causes severe diarrhea. But look at what was in his teeth. He had been eating poplar, a tree that contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. And his plaque carried traces of penicillium, the exact mold that gives us penicillin. Read that again. Roughly 48,000 years ago, more than 40,000 years before modern medicine invented antibiotics and painkillers, a sick Neanderthal was dosing himself with a natural painkiller and a natural antibiotic, aimed squarely at the illness destroying him. These are the creatures we used to dismiss as dumb brutes. They were treating their own diseases before our species had even built a single city. And they were not the only ancient patient who left evidence behind. In 1991, hikers in the Alps found a body melting out of the ice. He had died roughly 5,300 years ago, and he was a medical disaster. We call him Ötzi. Scientists found his gut infested with whipworm, a parasite that would have caused pain, nausea, and diarrhea. And carried among his belongings on leather cords was a fungus called birch polypore, a fungus with antibacterial properties that can help purge exactly the kind of intestinal parasite he had. This man was carrying targeted medicine for the specific illness inside him. But the strangest part is on his skin. Ötzi's body is covered in 61 tattoos, and they are not decoration. They are simple lines and crosses, clustered almost entirely over his joints, his lower back, his ankles, precisely the places an aging body aches. Many researchers now believe these tattoos were a primitive medical treatment, a form of pain relief marked directly onto the body, thousands of years before acupuncture was ever written down in China. Ancient humans were not helplessly waiting to die. They were watching, experimenting, treating themselves. But not every treatment they invented was gentle. Some of it is the stuff of nightmares. The oldest surgery we have ever found involves drilling a hole straight through a living person's skull. It's called trepanation, and people were doing it in the Stone Age, with sharpened stone, on conscious patients, with no real anesthetic and zero understanding of infection. They likely believed it released the pressure, or the evil spirit, behind crippling headaches, seizures, and madness. Now brace yourself for the part that defies belief. In 2018, researchers including John Verano of Tulane University studied more than 800 trypan skulls from ancient Peru, more than the rest of the world combined. By measuring how much the bone had healed and regrown around each hole, they could tell who had survived. And the survival rates were astonishing. In the later periods, up to 80% of patients lived through having a hole carved into their skull. To put that in perspective, when American Civil War surgeons performed similar head operations in the 1860s, with metal instruments in hospitals, barely half their patients survived. Ancient people, using stone, with no idea germs existed, were better at skull surgery than doctors 400 years later. So if ancient humans were this resourceful, this clever, this capable, why did so many of them still die so young? Because for all their ingenuity, they were still fighting an enemy they could not see. And most of the time, they lost. A small cut could turn septic and kill you in days. A bout of diarrhea could drain the life out of a child before anyone understood why. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous events in a human life, for both mother and baby. The infections we now erase with a cheap course of antibiotics were, for almost all of history, a slow death sentence. And this is the brutal truth hiding behind those statistics about ancient people only living to 30. It's not that nobody grew old, plenty did. It's that so many died as infants and children that they dragged the whole average down, killed by illnesses we now barely register. Which leads to something profound. Every person watching this is descended from an unbroken chain of survivors, people whose immune systems were just strong enough, whose luck held just long enough, to live and have children in a world with no medicine at all. You exist because they made it. And maybe that is the real story here. Every remedy that worked, every healing plant, every hard-won scrap of knowledge was passed from parent to child, generation after generation, for tens of thousands of years. One enormous, blood-soaked experiment with no instructions and no guarantee. That long chain of trial and error is the foundation that every hospital, every pharmacy, every surgery on Earth was eventually built on top of. The shaman shaking a rattle over a fever and the surgeon scrubbing in for an operation are part of the very same story. The refusal, hardwired into our species, to simply lie down and accept that we are sick. And here's the part that will stay with you. The next time you are lying in bed with a fever, miserable, sweating, wishing it would just stop, understand what is actually happening. That fever is not your body breaking down. It is your body fighting, deliberately raising its own temperature to make itself hostile to the invaders. The same ancient defense your ancestors' bodies used in caves hundreds of thousands of years ago. You are not separate from those people shivering in the dark, chewing willow bark, praying to spirits and refusing to give up. You are what they survived to create. Every time you get sick and get back up, you are running a program that has been perfected over 300,000 years. They never had the answers, but they never stopped fighting for them. And neither, it turns out, will you.